Yo, what's good, yo? Welcome back to ETD React. It's your boy King David, and y'all, today I'm talking about United States and Venezuela. We've all been hearing it. If you haven't been hearing it, you're probably stuck under a rock somewhere. But the United States, Donald Trump, looks like playing with the idea of war with Venezuela. And they talk about it's about the drug cartels and the Tren de Aragua gang, and they're shipping drugs, but the story's a little bit deeper. So let me just catch y'all up to speed. As of today, this video is a day old. So this is pretty recent. But I want to dive into what's the context of all of this. How did all this come up? So I'm gonna play y'all a recent news video and then a less recent video of a man brilliantly breaking down what led up to all this. So let's just hop straight into it. Also, links to the original videos will be in the description below, and I forget to shout it out, but y'all, my book Peeling Off the Layers is out on Amazon. Y'all, this book is powerful. I get very vulnerable. I get very deep in this book about how God supernaturally transformed my entire life, my personality to everything else. And it's very deep. I really expose myself in it. So go check it out on Amazon. So let's hop straight into it.
Next tonight, tensions are escalating between the U.S. and Venezuela. On Saturday, 5 American F-35 fighter jets landed in Puerto Rico. The Trump administration says it's part of a major crackdown on drug trafficking. How Venezuela is now responding. Here's ABC's Christian Cordero.
Tonight, US-Venezuela tensions are rising in the Caribbean Sea as 5 American F-35 fighter jets are seen landing in Puerto Rico this weekend as part of a military buildup. The Trump administration says the heightened presence is to crack down on drug trafficking. It comes as Venezuela's government releases this video it says is of armed U.S. personnel approaching a fishing boat Friday, moments before boarding and occupying it. A U.S. official tells ABC News Coast Guard members searched the boat to see if it was carrying drugs, but didn't find any. In its condemnation, Venezuela called the incident hostile and illegal, claiming it happened within the country's economic exclusion zone, which the U.S. denies, saying they boarded the vessel in international waters. It's the second dispute at sea in as many weeks between the two countries, after the U.S. military strike on a speedboat carrying 11 people from Venezuela. The administration claims they were cartel members smuggling drugs.
Venezuela's been a very bad actor, and we understand that. And when you look at that boat, you see the bags of whatever it is there. Those bags those bags represent hundreds of thousands of dead people in the United States.
And now Venezuela is conducting large-scale militia training, civilians volunteering to serve as reservists. President Nicolas Maduro urges all Venezuelans to prepare for an armed struggle if needed. As the rhetoric escalates, Lindsay, there are still many questions about that September 2nd boat strike. Experts have questioned the administration's legal rationale for attacking the boat, and it's still unclear who exactly was on it or where it was going. Lindsay?
Christian Cordero for us. Thank you.
Jeez, y'all, that's crazy. All right, I'm not going to chatter too much because I'm about to show another video. But here's the thing, with the U.S. pulling up to their fishing boat, checking it for drugs, I can't blame them for checking it. Now, whether it was in the international waters or not, that's an important piece of information to the story. But I believe that, and because you got to look at the motive, I believe that Trump and the United States government is using the drugs as like a reason to basically get into war, to use their military, and their goal is to get Maduro, the Venezuelan leader, out of office. They want a regime change, as they're saying. And the thing is, from a presidential leader standpoint, it's not about the war. It's about getting your civilians to support the war. So that's us as Americans now. That's what we need to be thinking about, is Donald Trump trying to convince us that we should be using military action, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, so I say all this to say this dude is about to break it down. I think with what I just said, if y'all track with that, it's gonna probably change how you look at this. So let's look at how all this started, really.
Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and in classic American fashion, we are staring down the barrel of the next major war and conflict, this one with Venezuela, it looks like. And, you know, I think it's been, what, total of, I got it written down here, 76 days since the end of the 12-day war with Iran. We haven't even made it 3 months. Interesting how this works out. Looks like war is back on the menu, boys.
Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys.
Now, like always with these things, we're not really getting the full story from the administration or the media, the real strategic intent behind this whole thing. So that's what we're going to go over today. Talk about that. This video. And also talk about what I think happens going forward. Are we actually going to end up in more? We'll have to see. All right, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Helps the channel. Follow us on Patreon. Grab some merch. Let's jump into this thing. All right, first thing we're going to do is just a quick 30,000-foot view, quick history, how we got here. All right, so again, this is the Cliff Notes. So we're going back to World War II. United States and Venezuela used to be the best of buddies. Venezuela actually supplied nearly 50% of the oil for the United States war effort at the time. That relationship went swimmingly. That went swimmingly until 1976, of course, when Venezuela decided to nationalize their oil industry. Essentially what that means is the big companies like Exxon, Mobil, and Shell that owned much of the oil production in Venezuela kind of kicked out, turned into customers, and Venezuela nationalized and took control of all the oil. Of course, the United States really doesn't like when countries do that. Iran, etc. And again, that eventually turned us into a customer of the oil rather than an owner of the oil. And going forward, of course, Venezuela turns to socialism. Those ties fracture even further. We get close to where we are today. 2013, Nicolas Maduro is elected, and then the big problems start. Of course, the United States and him really don't get along, but who does he really get along with? China, which of course will be important a little bit later, as this might be a little bit of a proxy war that we're looking at. And Maduro further complicates the things by basically taking the nationalized oil industry and just giving control and ownership of it to his buddies and making it even more difficult for the United States to do business with them. That leads up to about 2019, when pretty much all bilateral cooperation burns out, fizzles out, and yeah, we're get to where we are today, where we have 4,000 Marines and a ton of our naval destroyers sitting off the coast of Venezuela, looking like we're potentially going to invade, maybe. And that brings us to where we are today, all right? The official story we're sort of being told out of the media and the administration is this is one big cartel crackdown. It's just an extension of shutting down the border, right? You have Maduro, who's an extension of that, supplying terrorist organizations and the drug cartels, and even the United States designating Venezuelan gangs Tren de Aragua a terrorist organization earlier in the year. And the total extension of this whole thing is the United States has now put a $50 million bounty on Maduro's head, as well as staging a ton of military presence right outside their borders. Now, is this all about cartels, or is this more likely what we always see with war with the United States, more so about control of oil and also cutting off control of oil from our biggest adversary, China? So that's what I think is really going on here, and we're going to dive a little bit into this. So obviously, Venezuela, massive producer of oil, and where does all that oil go? Well, let's take a look. As you can see, nearly 50% of all of Venezuela's oil goes to China, and who's the next biggest purchaser? Us. But again, we have to buy it, and we're buying it at a rate we're not very happy with. Why is Venezuela so important oil-wise to the United States? Well, geographically, it only takes 1 day to ship oil from Venezuela to the United States, whereas coming from the Middle East, it takes a full 30 days to get here. So yes, having a neighbor that's one of the biggest suppliers of oil and also one of the biggest suppliers of oil to China, yeah, we're not real happy about that. So what would be a really, really good thing for the United States to have happen is, oh, of course, maybe just a regime change away from a pro-China Maduro to a democracy with a pro-United States leader, which would then do what? Would allow American oil businesses, Exxon, Shell, Mobil, back into the country to invest and take ownership back of a lot of that oil production, which would be fantastic for the United States economy. And the administration is giving hints of that. I mean, even Secretary Hegseth came out and said this, right? Anytime you have the Secretary of Defense talking about how it's time for regime change, yeah, usually that only goes one way. So I'm not saying that, you know, shutting down the cartels and Tren de Aragua and all these different things aren't important, right, to the country, cutting off the drug supply, although it's a little bit disingenuous about kind of how this is being framed, because from what I understand, Venezuela's primary producer of cocaine, not fentanyl. That's more of a, you know, southern border issue, but it's a great, I don't want to call it propaganda tool because it's a real issue and it's one I actually agree with being shut down, but it's a great reason to give the American public for why we need military action and potential war against Venezuela. Because if you were simply just to say, well, we don't like the fact that this socialist controlled country who has terrible ties with our country is producing tons of oil for China, yeah, the American public might not be as bought in on it. But to see where we are now, Venezuela has apparently readied 4.5 million militiamen, from what they're saying. Yes, the United States Navy and Marine Corps are sitting off the coast, potentially ready to engage in a conflict. What happens next? Well, we've seen Maduro is acting a little bit out of control, sending his, one of 2 fighter jets that he has to buzz Navy ships. And it looks like potentially we're 1 aircraft away from getting shot down to spark this whole thing up like a light. But will we actually go to war with Venezuela? Will we put 4,000 Marine boots on the ground? I can tell you 4,000 Marines backed up by all the power of those navies and destroyers with U.S. American air assets on top. That is not something you want to mess with. Strategically and tactically, is it going to be possible if we need to? Yes, of course. But is it actually likely? Well, that centers on a lot of political things. First one, right out the gate, 2026 elections right around the corner. What is the American appetite, political appetite from the populace for an actual war right before the election? Oof. That is a serious gamble. Yes, you do have sort of the branding of the war about how it's counter drug and counter narcotic and counter gang, and it's keeping Americans safe, all those different things, which I'm not saying is not true. But is that enough for if U.S. soldiers start dying? That I don't know, because, man, war is always a dangerous political gamble. Okay, we saw in, I believe, Bush Jr.'s second election, they were considering enacting the draft in the global war on terror and decided not to because it was an election year and they thought it'd be political suicide. They went with the stop loss instead. And now, coming off of, the heels of the whole Iran-Israel thing, the American public was not happy about that whole thing for the most part. So do I think we're actually going to land amphibious assaults by Marines and take Venezuela and overthrow their government by force? I doubt it. Not likely. I do think there's probably massive destabilization operations going on in Venezuela right now. The CIA and special operations, all sorts of different things to try to probably, again, with these massive bounties on Maduro's head, force a regime change through subversion and sabotage tactics. That 100% I can guarantee is probably already happening right now. But as for full-scale war, I don't think that is. I don't think America's quite ready for that one, especially in this situation. Also, even if the United States just absolutely rolled over and curb stomped, you got to think about all of the Venezuelan people that are going to end up killed in that conflict as well. And man, it would be an ugly, ugly time, especially for the incumbency, right? The Republicans, to decide to engage in war. And that's why, because of the timeline, I don't think it's going to happen that way. But I very well could be wrong. I mean, the person we have in charge has got a hair trigger. And, all of a sudden Venezuela starts firing rockets, or, their aircraft start shooting at our naval ships, and we might actually see it. But this is an interesting one because it's sort of developing in real time. And so if anything big happens, we will track it and get it in the next one. That's going to do it for this one. Catch y'all in the next one.
Wow, I agree with everything he said, to be honest. And just to roll on top of that, 2 things can be true at one time. The drug trafficking of the cartels can be a legitimate, real problem, real thing that's happening that's really costing American lives. And Donald Trump or I'll just say United States, could be using the idea of drug trafficking cartels as a propaganda tool to make us American citizens agree with this war that they may or may not start in order to get the regime change. You know, because what really sells me on it's not just about drugs and the cartel is that the baseline, most wars that happen, I want to say most, a lot of wars that happen are about oil and resources. You know, that's what a lot of wars are over. And the way he explained how, you know, Venezuela being United States oil supplier, then, you know, nationalizing it, then selling to China, and now China gets more of their oil than we do. A lot of that really makes sense. When you put all the puzzle pieces together, you realize it might be more about the oil and, you know, us having our little puppet government running Venezuela than the actual drug cartels. And the thing you have to realize is the last thing I'm going to say. Every lie, you know, every piece of deception has some kind of truth, you know. So even when you hear Donald Trump say this stuff like, all these bags represent bodies, like it's like an emotional thing. He's like trying to trigger an emotional response. You know, when you see these like emotional propaganda forms of speech and whatnot come into play, it really raises my propaganda antennas, you know. So I'm just gonna keep watching the open mind, you know, see what happens. I mean, like he said, it's happening live in front of us, so it's pretty interesting. But anywho, let me know what y'all think in the comments, y'all. Like, subscribe, you know, get involved with us, check us out. I love y'all. God bless y'all. Peace out. Peace out.